The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Imagine a 15-year-old kid standing in his bedroom, staring up at a high ceiling. Hanging from above is a single rope with a softball tied to the end, dangling right at chest height. This boy, buzzing with energy and determination, takes a deep breath. He's been learning karate, and he's come up with what he thinks is a brilliant training idea. The concept seems straightforward enough. Strike the ball, and when it swings back toward him, he'll block it, deflect it, and strike again. A beautiful dance of discipline and precision. He winds up and throws his first karate chop. Whack! The ball flies away to the end of the rope, then comes rocketing back and smacks him square in the side of the head. He staggers backward, seeing stars. Okay, maybe this wasn't going to be quite as simple as he'd imagined. He tries again with a front kick. The ball swings out and returns, nailing him in the shoulder. A hook kick? It catches him right in the elbow. For weeks, this becomes his painful routine. That relentless ball just keeps hitting him over and over. Progress feels almost non-existent. But here's the thing about this kid. He refuses to quit. He shows up in that bedroom every single day. After a month of daily practice, he can occasionally block the ball. After 3 months, he's hitting it with his hands, feet, elbows, and knees, successfully blocking it from most angles. And after 6 months of this daily ritual, something remarkable happens. The ball never touches him again. He becomes a blur of motion, spinning, kicking, striking, and blocking with fluid precision. His body moves almost without conscious thought, like a perfectly programmed machine that can anticipate the ball's every possible trajectory. He'd stumbled upon a profound truth that would shape the rest of his life. Becoming a master wasn't about learning 4,000 different techniques. It was about mastering just a handful of moves by practicing them 4,000 times. That determined teenager was Chet Holmes. And that one powerful lesson forms the beating heart of his legendary book, The Ultimate Sales Machine. Today I want to share that lesson with you. We're going to explore how this idea of relentless focus on fundamentals can transform not just a business, but any area of life you're serious about improving. By the end of our time together, you'll understand the secret to working smarter instead of just harder, and you'll have a blueprint for building your own personal success machine based on 12 key strategies. This isn't just about sales techniques. It's about mastery itself. And it all starts with what Chet called pig-headed discipline and determination. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed, like your to-do list somehow grew its own to-do list? You're working hard, racing from one task to the next, but when you finally collapse at the end of the day, you realize you haven't really moved the needle on what actually matters. Most businesses, and honestly most people, operate exactly this way. They're busy. They're constantly putting out fires. They're reacting to whatever crisis pops up next. Chet Holmes saw this pattern everywhere he consulted. He'd walk into companies where everyone, from the chief executive to the newest salesperson, was working incredibly hard. But they weren't getting smarter, and they definitely weren't growing the way they hoped to. They were stuck in place, spinning their wheels. They were attempting to juggle 4,000 different things, dabbling in hundreds of ideas, but never truly mastering any single one. And Chet's message was almost shockingly simple: stop doing that. He argued that the key to extraordinary growth isn't doing more things. It's doing fewer things, but doing them significantly better. It's applying what he called pig-headed discipline and determination to a very small number of high-impact strategies. The same kind of discipline he'd learned in his bedroom with that swinging softball. It all begins with the one resource none of us can ever get back: our time. Chet tells a story from when he was running 9 different divisions for billionaire Charlie Munger. Back then, he was the classic got-a-minute manager. All day long, his team members would pop their heads through his door asking, "Hey, got a minute?" And naturally, being helpful, he always said yes. His entire day became an endless series of interruptions. He was working 12-hour days, 7 days a week, just reacting to whatever chaos walked through his door. He'd drag himself home exhausted, only to start the creative work he couldn't get to during the actual workday. He knew something had to change fundamentally. He noticed that his boss, the billionaire, didn't operate this way at all. To meet with Charlie Munger, you needed a scheduled appointment. You needed a clear agenda. Meetings were focused and productive. Then they ended. So Chet made a decision. He'd run his own life like a billionaire runs theirs. He sent out a memo that essentially ended the quote-a-minute culture in his office. It said, plain and simple, "Do not come to my door asking if I have a minute. The answer will be no." Instead, he established weekly, one-hour meetings for each of his major impact areas like sales, marketing, and customer service. All ideas, all issues, all non-urgent concerns had to wait for those scheduled meetings. The result was nothing short of revolutionary. He went from reacting for 80 hours a week to proactively running his business in just a handful of highly focused hours. Suddenly, the rest of his time opened up. He could finally think strategically, plan ahead, and work on the business instead of just working in it. This led directly to his first core principle for building the ultimate sales machine. You absolutely must master your time before you can master anything else. He distilled it into 6 simple steps, but the most powerful one is what he called the touch it once rule. Think about your own day for a second. How many times do you open an email, read it, think, "I'll deal with this later," then close it? Later you open that same email again, reread it, rethink about it. Chet actually calculated that just 15 minutes of this wasted rereading each day adds up to over 97 hours per year. That's more than 2 full weeks of work where absolutely nothing gets accomplished. His rule is beautifully simple. If you touch it, take action immediately. Don't open the email until you're actually ready to deal with it. Don't pick up that piece of mail unless you're prepared to respond. This one shift forces you to become proactive instead of constantly reactive. The second part of his time mastery system was making a list of the 6 most important things you need to accomplish each day. Not 26 things, just 6. A long list becomes a recipe for feeling busy without being productive. You'll naturally pick the easy tasks just for the psychological satisfaction of crossing them off, while the most important, most difficult tasks get pushed to tomorrow, then the next day, then the next. With a list of only 6 items, you're forced to focus on what truly matters. And there's an enormous psychological boost when you cross off that 6th item and know with certainty that you've accomplished the most important things for that day. Once you've got your time under control, you create the space needed to install the next foundational piece of the machine, relentless training. Chet loved telling the story of 2 woodcutters. The first one works all day long, swinging his axe without a single break. The second one stops frequently, taking what look like long rests. At the end of the day, the second woodcutter has cut a much larger pile of wood. The first woodcutter, exhausted and confused, asks, "How is that even possible? You were resting all day." The second woodcutter just smiles and replies, "I wasn't resting. I was sharpening my saw." Training, Chet argued passionately, is sharpening your saw. Most companies view it as an annoying interruption from the real work, but the most successful companies recognize it as the most important work of all. He points out that only about 10% of people naturally seek out learning and improvement on their own. The other 90% simply won't improve unless it's made a requirement. This is exactly why you need to build a culture of mandatory, consistent, ongoing training. Not just a one-time motivational seminar that gets everyone pumped up for about a week before they forget everything they learned. No, Chet advocated for regular, repetitive training on the fundamentals, the same way he practiced those karate moves 4,000 times. He discovered that with each training session on the same core topic, the skill level rises noticeably, and while it might drop off slightly afterward, it never drops all the way back to where it started. With each repetition, the baseline gets higher and higher, until eventually the skill becomes permanent. until it becomes true mastery. And the most effective way to conduct this training? Through workshops. This isn't about a manager lecturing at a passive team. It's about getting everyone in a room to actively work together on solving one specific problem. He tells an incredible story about a publishing company he consulted with. He gathered 20 employees and asked one simple question: what are the things standing in the way of this being a much better company? Together they filled an entire whiteboard with ideas. One major issue that kept coming up was too many inconsistencies in how customer service handles complaints. For an entire decade, these problems had festered and grown. Whenever a particularly tricky complaint came in, it would inevitably end up on the president's desk, because there were no standard procedures in place. The president was always too busy putting out fires to ever create a permanent solution. So Chet held a focused workshop on just that one issue. In 2 hours, just 2 focused hours, the team collectively identified and solved 18 distinct customer service problems that had plagued the company for 10 years. They created standard responses, drafted form letters, and established a clear hierarchy of solutions the representatives could offer without needing management approval. The president's time was suddenly freed up, and the employees felt genuinely empowered. The machine was starting to run more smoothly. This is exactly what Chet meant by working on the business. 1 hour per week, dedicated to a workshop that improves one small piece of the machine. After a year, you have a massively transformed company. Once you have this foundation solidly in place, your time is managed well, your team is constantly training and improving, and you're using workshops to systematically solve problems. Now you can start thinking like a true strategist. And this, my friend, is where the real magic begins. This is the idea that separates the merely good from the truly brilliant. Chet asks you to imagine a giant stadium. The entire audience is filled with your perfect prospects, every single person you could ever want to sell to. You get one chance to walk out onto that stage and deliver a presentation. Right before you go out, the announcer tells the crowd, "You had to come here today, but you don't have to stay. If this person isn't interesting, you're free to get up and leave whenever you want." Now, what would you say? If you confidently walk out and announce, "Hi everyone, I'm here to tell you why our widgets are the absolute best widgets in the world," what do you think happens? Almost everyone stands up and leaves. Chet Holmes, through years of careful research, discovered something he called the buyer's pyramid. At any given moment, in any market, only 3% of people are actively buying now. They're searching for a solution right this second. Maybe another 7% are open to the idea, but they're not actively looking yet. But the other 90%? They fall into 3 distinct categories. Those who are not thinking about it, those who think they're not interested, and those who are definitely not interested. Your typical sales pitch only speaks to that tiny 3% at the top. The other 97% tune you out immediately. So what headline, what opening line could you possibly use in that stadium to keep everyone in their seats? This is the essence of what Chet called, quote, education-based marketing. The secret is this: you will attract far more buyers by offering to teach them something genuinely valuable than you ever will by just trying to sell them your product. Instead of a presentation titled, "Why Our Office Equipment is the Best," what if the title was, "The 5 Ways Your Company is Wasting Money in Operations and Administration"? Every single chief financial officer in that stadium is staying in their seat for that presentation. They're curious now. You've offered them real value. You've promised to make them smarter and save them money. Chet implemented this approach on a massive scale with a newspaper company that had been in decline for 4 straight years. Their ad salespeople were making the same tired tactical calls. "Hi, I'm calling from the Gazette. Would you like to buy an ad?" The answer was almost always some variation of, "No thanks." Chet completely transformed the script. The salespeople started calling local business owners and saying something more like this: "Hi, I'm calling from the Gazette." We've underwritten a new educational program for local business owners that teaches the 5 most common reasons businesses fail and the 7 ways to become the most popular business in your area. We feel it's our obligation to help our local community thrive. Would you be interested in learning these strategies? The response was overwhelming. They were getting appointments with 90% of the people who would have otherwise hung up on them immediately. The presentation itself was packed with legitimate, valuable market data about business success. It wasn't a thinly veiled sales pitch. It was genuine education that business owners could actually use. Only at the very end did it artfully transition to show how consistent newspaper advertising was one of the key pillars of a successful local marketing strategy. The business owners didn't feel sold to at all. They felt educated and empowered, and as Chet wisely observed, when you sell, you break rapport. When you educate, you build it. This single strategic shift accomplished a dozen objectives all at once. It made getting appointments easy. It positioned the salespeople as trusted experts instead of pushy vendors. It built genuine trust and credibility. It subtly unseated all their competitors by establishing new criteria for success. And it made selling almost foolproof because the presentation itself did all the heavy lifting. This brings us to the most precisely targeted strategy in the entire book, the one that Chet personally used to double a company's sales 3 years in a row. He called it the Dream 100 strategy. The logic is elegantly simple. In any market, there's a relatively small number of best buyers who buy more, buy faster, and buy more often than anyone else. Instead of marketing to everyone with a scattered approach, you focus a relentless, dedicated effort on just your top 100 dream clients. When Chet took over advertising sales for one of Charlie Munger's magazines, he discovered that out of 2,200 potential advertisers, just 167 of them accounted for 95% of all the advertising spending in the entire industry. His magazine hadn't landed a single one of them, so he launched a focused Dream 100 campaign. He and his team started hitting those 167 dream clients from every possible direction. They sent personalized letters. They made strategic phone calls. But they also did something creative and genuinely unforgettable. Every 2 weeks, they sent a small, clever gift. One week, it was a Rubik's Cube with an attached note that said, "Puzzled about how to increase productivity? We can help." 2 weeks later, it was a flashlight. "Don't be in the dark about the biggest dangers facing your industry." Then a compass arrived. Losing direction in today's market? It was fun, it was different, and most importantly, it got their attention. Soon, executives were actually calling them, saying things like, "Okay, you got me, I have to meet you. I've got all your little gifts sitting on my desk, and my team keeps asking about them." This pig-headed, disciplined campaign, combined with their powerful educational presentation, worked wonders. Within a year, they had successfully landed dozens of these top-tier advertisers, doubling the magazine's sales. They repeated the success the next year, and again the year after that. 3 years in a row of doubled sales. This perfectly demonstrates the power of focus. While everyone else in the industry was frantically chasing thousands of small fish with a wide net, they were laser-focused on landing the whales. Of course, a brilliant strategy and a perfect target list are completely useless without the right people to execute the plan. This is why Chet dedicated so much of his work to the science of what he called hiring superstars. He believed that most companies don't actually know what to look for when hiring. They hire based on background and experience, but Chet hired based on personality traits. He used various profiling tools, but his core insight was that a superstar salesperson needs a unique combination of 2 specific traits: high dominance and high influence. In simple terms, high dominance means having a strong ego. It's that inner drive, that personal ambition, that absolute refusal to accept no for a final answer. It's the psychological armor that allows a salesperson to face rejection 8 times in a row and come back for a 9th attempt with confidence, because they genuinely believe the client needs what they're offering. High influence is empathy and likability. It's a love of people, the natural ability to build rapport quickly, to listen actively, and to genuinely understand another person's perspective. Someone with only high influence is too nice. They completely understand why the customer doesn't want to buy, and they rarely close deals. Someone with only high dominance is a bulldozer. They might occasionally close a sale through sheer force, but they'll alienate the customer in the process. But someone with both traits, that person is a genuine superstar. They bond with people like crazy, but they also have the inner drive to always ask for the sale. Chet developed a now famous method for finding these rare individuals. His job advertisements would start with a bold headline, "Superstars Only." The ad itself was written as a challenge. It said things like, "Don't even bother calling unless you're a proven overachiever and can demonstrate it." This naturally attracted people with strong egos right from the start. But then came the real test. When a promising candidate actually called, the first thing Chet's team would do seems counterintuitive. They'd reject them. The conversation would go something like this: "So you think you're a superstar? Tell me why." The candidate would launch into their pitch about their achievements, and the response would be a calm, almost dismissive, "I'm not really hearing it. I'm not hearing superstar qualities here." Most candidates would crumble under this challenge. They'd stammer, apologize, and quickly hang up. But a true superstar, their ego would kick into gear. They wouldn't accept that rejection. They'd push back. They'd start asking probing questions. They'd start selling themselves even harder. Some might even say something like, "Well, maybe you're not listening carefully enough." That's the person Chet wanted to hire. He was testing for resilience and that essential inner fire before he'd even agreed to meet them in person. Finally, all these pieces, the time management, the training culture, the strategy, the targeting, the hiring, are held together by the final two disciplines: masterful sales skills and fanatical follow-up. For Chet, the sales process was a science with 7 distinct steps, but the underlying philosophy was beautifully simple. It begins with establishing genuine rapport, not just surface-level small talk. It's about genuinely getting into the client's world, understanding their business goals, their current challenges, their family situation, even their hobbies and interests. It's about becoming an actual friend. Because, as he well knew, it's very difficult for a competitor to steal a client away from a true friend. And after the sale is finally made, the work isn't over at all. It's actually just beginning. The 7th and most consistently overlooked step is systematic follow-up. Chet believed that the moment you walk out that door after closing a deal, the client starts to cool off emotionally. The enthusiasm naturally fades. The clutter factor of 1,000 other messages flooding in each day starts to erase their memory of you and what made you special. Your job is to stay visible in their world forever, not by constantly trying to sell them more stuff, but by continuously bonding with them. By sending handwritten thank you notes, by sharing a funny cartoon that made you think of them, by hosting appreciation events and client parties, by sharing a meal with no agenda, by becoming such a valuable resource who helps them succeed in their own business that you're genuinely indispensable, by becoming so naturally ingrained in their world that the thought of buying from anyone else would feel like a betrayal of the relationship. That's how you transform a one-time customer into a client for life. That's how you build an unbreakable bond. And that's the final piece that locks the ultimate sales machine into place, ensuring it runs smoothly, powerfully, and profitably, year after year after year. It's a system built not on unnecessary complexity, but on the relentless, pig-headed, disciplined mastery of the fundamentals. When you really step back and look at everything Chet Holmes teaches throughout the ultimate sales machine, it's natural to get excited about specific tactics like the Dream 100 approach, or the stadium pitch concept, or the techniques for hiring superstars. These are genuinely powerful, potentially game-changing strategies. But here's the thing. The most profound lesson isn't actually any single tactic or technique. It's the simple, almost stubborn underlying philosophy that he first learned as a kid in his bedroom with that swinging softball. True mastery comes from the relentless, disciplined repetition of the fundamentals. It's the idea of pig-headed discipline and determination. We live in a world absolutely obsessed with novelty. The next shiny object, the next supposed hack, the next promised shortcut to success. We want to learn 4,000 different things, somehow convinced that more information is the key to success. But Chet's entire body of work argues exactly the opposite. He demonstrates that the path to extraordinary results isn't wider, it's deeper. It's not about doing more things, but about doing the essential things over and over and over until they become second nature, until you can do them without thinking, until your organization runs like a well-oiled machine. This philosophy is incredibly liberating, especially when you're young and ambitious. It tells you that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be a genius with some rare gift. You just need to have the discipline to focus intensely. Pick the few things that truly matter, like the 12 core competencies he carefully lays out, and commit to them with a focus so intense that it might border on obsession. This principle applies to absolutely anything you want to achieve in life. Learning a musical instrument isn't about memorizing 1,000 complex chords. It's about mastering the basic scales and fundamental chords so thoroughly that your fingers move without conscious thought. Becoming a great athlete isn't about knowing 1,000 fancy plays. It's about drilling the fundamentals of your sport until your body reacts instinctively in game situations. And building a successful project, business, or career isn't about frantically chasing every new trend. It's about mastering the basics of time management, strategic thinking, and consistent execution. So how can you start applying this powerful idea to your own life right now? You don't have to transform everything overnight. Just start with one thing. First, master your time. For just 1 week, try Chet's List of 6 approach. Before you go to bed each night, write down the 6 most important things you need to accomplish the next day. No more than 6. And then, with pig-headed determination, don't allow yourself to get sidetracked until those 6 things are actually done. Notice how it feels to end a day, knowing with certainty that you accomplished what truly matters. Second, become an educator instead of a seller. Pick a subject you're genuinely passionate about, a hobby, a school project, an idea for a potential business. Instead of thinking about how to sell people on it, think about what you could teach them that would be genuinely valuable. Create your own mini stadium pitch. What's the fascinating data or the surprising fact that would make people lean in and want to know more? This simple shift transforms your entire approach from trying to take value to genuinely giving value. And third, identify your personal Dream 10. Forget about 100 for now. Just start with 10. Who are 10 people whose attention and support could genuinely change your life trajectory? A potential mentor, an inspiring coach, a possible collaborator, someone whose work you deeply admire. Now, think like Chet would. How can you start a creative campaign to get on their radar, not by asking them for something, but by offering them something of genuine value, followed up with relentless, creative persistence? It all comes back to that swinging softball. Mastery isn't magic or mysterious. It isn't reserved exclusively for the naturally gifted. It's the natural, inevitable outcome of focused, disciplined, relentless repetition. Chet Holmes has given us the complete blueprint. He's shown us the moves. Now, all that's left is for each of us to go into our own rooms and practice them 4,000 times. That was a summary of The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. We've certainly covered the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you hold the actual book in your hands and let the ideas sink in deeply. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or even a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This podcast is designed to be your guide, to help you decide if this book deserves your time and attention. If anything we've talked about today has sparked even a small fire in you, I'd encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning new concepts. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you approach your goals and your daily life. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the Billionaires bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.